Hello, hello, hello to the family. Welcome to Let's Discuss with Meg Duke. I'm your host, Meg Duke. Obviously, my name is in the title. I'm here by myself this week. It is Thanksgiving, so I didn't want to bother anybody with their schedule, but we've got a number of amazing guests coming up starting in December, so please like, rate, most importantly, subscribe to my YouTube and my Apple Podcasts because you're going to get alerts whenever new content is posted. And I'm so excited for the topics we're going to cover and the wonderful human beings who are going to join me. They're very gracious to give of their time. And also selfishly, I'm just excited to sit and kiki with my girls for, I don't know, however long these episodes take. So, so thank you all for the week off last week. It was rough. The allergens out here are serious. And like I said, I called it out myself, totally on me. Put a really negative energy in the space of like, oh, it's 30 degrees this weekend, and then it's going to be 70, and then it's going to be 29 again. That's going to make me sick. And it did. So, anyway, we are here now, and that's all that matters. So today I wanted to talk about anxiety. If you know me at all, which some of you don't, some of you are learning about me through this podcast and video series. So great. Welcome. If you know anything about me though at all as a human, you know that I'm obsessed with drag. I'm obsessed. Capital O. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've obviously seen almost every single season of Drag Race, RuPaul's Drag Race, Canada, UK. Need to get further into the different, I haven't seen Thailand yet. There are other countries that are out there, but I'm so excited for it. So anyway, but I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I promise I'm going somewhere with this that's bringing it all back around to anxiety. But the thing that really sparked me this week of wanting to talk about it was I listened to a podcast called Drag Her. It's on HeadGum, and Mano Agapion is the host of that podcast. So there's your plug for that. Go check him out over there. And I don't know if you all see Nailed It or what is that show with John Cena? Wipeout, I think. Or a number of other things. She's been in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Nicole Byer is on it all the time, and we love Nicole Byer. She's also a host or a guest judge on Drag Race, on RuPaul's Drag Race. So like the jealousy. Anyway, it's a great podcast. But he was talking about one of the episodes, because that's what the thing goes through, and goes through each episode of each season. And in talking about season 13, he said, and this is me pulling this out of somewhere, but I think it stands very well by it on its own. He said, anxiety has no consideration for logic. And I thought, oh my gosh, thank goodness I just pulled into a parking lot, because I'm writing that down. And I typed it into my phone, because who uses a pen anymore, right? But, excuse me. But yeah, I thought that, I was like, I think a lot of times we stress about like, I shouldn't feel that way, and I shouldn't do this. I should be over that or whatever, which of course, as a therapist, we always say, don't should on yourself. But that should comes from wanting a rational belief behind something, wanting logic to prevail. Like, well, logically, I shouldn't be afraid of something. And logically, I shouldn't, this shouldn't bother me. And it's like, right, but that's not how anxiety works. Anxiety is not like that. I just like the way he just so succinctly, anxiety has no consideration for logic. So Mano, you have no idea who I am, but hats off to you, my friend. And thank you also for your podcast, because I'm obsessed with it. But especially for that, because it's not logical. It's not going to be, what we think is going to be able to happen. I should feel this way, I should feel that way. It's not going to be there. So something that I wanted to talk about today was kind of the difference between like fear and anxiety, right? So like an anxiety disorder, anxiety capital A, I say that a lot too, like depression with a capital D or lowercase d, right? So when you feel depressed versus having depression, when you feel anxious versus having anxiety, because they're two different things, much like I also have talked in the past. I talk a lot with supervisees or with clients about like the difference between selfish. Like I wish we could come up with a new word for selfish, because there's a difference between being selfish, like you only want to listen to the Backstreet Boys on this 10-hour car trip, even though the person in the car with you doesn't like the Backstreet Boys at all, and they can get over it because I'm selfish and I don't care, versus a good kind of selfish of like filling your own cup in order to be able to pour from a full cup, right? Or putting your own oxygen mask on first, the metaphor there. So, there are a lot of words in the English language where we're like, I'm anxious, I have anxiety. What does that look like? And so that's here what I would like to talk about today. So like kind of that fear, right? So when you kind of have that that tension. So like a normal reaction to stress is fear or anxiety, lowercase a, right? Versus when you just out of nowhere, again, no consideration for logic, right? Just out of nowhere. We do an assessment, the DOS-21, and it asks about like, feeling fear for no good reason. Like, and it's funny because when I ask that assessment question to a lot of my participants and my clients, they're like, oh, well, I fell down the stairs and I definitely felt scared. And I'm like, right, but that's not for no good reason. That's a very good reason. Like, if you weren't scared having fallen down the stairs, I would actually be concerned that perhaps there's something wrong in that regard. That's a fair thing to be afraid of. But this is like a fearful out of nowhere, based on nothing. I'm just all of a sudden feeling anxious and stressed, right? So those are kind of different there. Again, triggered by a specific stressor, a specific situation, anxiety, lowercase a, versus like disproportionate emotional response. And again, this, I don't like to use the word disproportionate or in like too intense, right? Like, what does normal mean? We do often say things like within normal limits, average, right? So it's difficult, and I don't want you to think that I'm like, well, you're not normal, you're not, but disproportionate, kind of what a reasonable response might be to something, would be, if this specific event happened, this is my anxiety, or this is my fear that I have, versus just like a much higher and heightened level. A lot of times fear has, or that lowercase a anxiety has, like a start and an end, right? Like, oh, I'm feeling it coming on and it's happening and now it's gone and it's moving on. Like that's a very common experience for a human on a daily basis even. Not to say that everyone has anxiety or fear every day, but it's kind of common, and it has that end point, which is really helpful. Whereas like an anxiety disorder, it can happen for days, weeks, months even, where you just can't key down and get down farther. To a calmer state. So the big difference there, of course, right? A lot of times we talk about that, feel like the butterflies that you get before you go on, or like stage fright even. I haven't been in a play since like 6th grade, so I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not like a BFA or anything, but like stage fright, it's like, butterflies mean you're about to do something good, and that's can be very helpful. That kind of anxiety being useful to say, like, I'm feeling this nervous energy, right? And I'm moving and I'm going and I'm grooving. And those of you on the podcast, you can't see, but I'm like, moving my arms around, like hyping myself up. Like I'm pumping up, I'm getting there, I'm going. And that can be useful, right? And motivational even, like, okay, I'm feeling it. And whereas obviously a lot of times when people feel that ongoing, pervasive, long anxiety, it's not really solution focused. It's not really toward like, I'm about to go on stage, I'm about to participate in a game or a sporting activity or something competitive, or whatever it might be that you're doing that you feel that good nervous energy, versus just it's ongoing and it's not really being able to be focused onto something. Much different there. Another piece that we talk about is, as we get further and further away from stressful situations, kind of goes away, or at least decreases, right? And this isn't necessarily go fully away, but as we like, okay, well, that's over and we're moving on, that I feel like it's going away a little bit. And whereas it does not, obviously, with the ongoing. So and I just remembered I forgot to talk about the opposite of the motivational piece, but talking about like it interferes with your day-to-day life. Like that anxiety is so pervasive and so there that you're not be able to harness it and like shoot it towards something. It's just, then it's kind of becomes crippling and makes it so that it interferes with your daily life. So that's a huge difference there as well. So and I think also oftentimes too, we talk about kind of the physical symptoms of anxiety, and I think people can have that with fear versus anxiety as well. Sweating, trembling, shaking hands, even feeling like lightheaded sometimes. That obviously, we talk about deep breathing and grounding techniques are very important because oxygen helps your body function. I know you came here to learn that right now. New information for everybody. But that's why we talk about that deep and controlled and measured breathing, is because when that oxygen flows to your muscles, everything sort of starts to relax physically, which then helps you to emotionally, mentally bring that back down. And if you're panting, if you're reaching toward hyperventilation, your muscles are starting to seize because the oxygen's not getting there. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure everyone literally has heard like, take deep breaths, or deep breath. Never tell somebody to calm down. Let me just go on a quick tangent about how much I hate when people say to calm down. Never, never, never tell somebody to calm down. Because what you're doing is invalidating their experience. Even if to you it's not a normal, air quotes, response, or something within normal limits, or that wouldn't have upset me like that, or whatever you think is going on, that is that person's reality. And telling them to calm down is literally saying, it's not that big of a deal. You need to calm down. Even though those are the words that you said, but just by saying those two words, you say sentences of, I don't believe what you're saying is valid. I don't believe this emotion. It's too much. Calm down. Calm down. So don't tell people to calm down. Anyway, that's my quick tangent on that one. But going back to what I was talking about with the physical symptoms, the racing heart. Like, have you ever been nervous and you can physically feel the pulses, like in your chest? You can feel like your heart, every movement. You're like, oh, this is how a heart works. I can, like, right now I'm sitting here and I'm just chatting to a screen, no big deal, and my heart rate is probably a little elevated because I'm excited, but I can't feel my heart rate going right now. Whereas what the thing that keeps like intrusively popping into my head, which is a good memory, is when I drove in the Grand Prix at Purdue, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Da, da, da. And I remembered somebody was like, did you never do competitive sports? And I was like, I did competitive sports all the time. I don't know, like, driving a go-kart is not something that I am used to competing in. And I've practiced every single day for, I don't know, it felt like months. It was months before the Grand Prix, but it was like that, like too much nervous energy. It was not a helpful, like, I was motivated. I was excited. My family had ridden up from Louisville to go see me at Purdue, but like, yeah, so too much. And that's what I think of when I think of like, kind of like, I gotta like physically shake. I'm just shaking it out. It's like, I'm trying to shake it off. I can't. My heart, I can feel it. Like I can feel it in my throat. I feel like I can just feel the blood coursing through my body because I'm so stressed out. And that obviously that was very situational, but that's an example of a time where a situational anxiety can mimic, the symptoms can be for the same for sure. I think a different thing to talk about too is that relaxation. Again, that DOS 21 that we talk about talks about relaxation. That's an evidence-based assessment that we do. And it talks about like just not being able to wind down, like just constantly keyed up, can't wind down, feeling that way. And with that fear that you feel, that lowercase a anxiety, doing something distracting can be very helpful. Something that's relaxing, putting on for me, it's Enya. God bless. I love Enya. Come for me if you want. I don't care. That's what I put. It's funny because Austin, my husband, will come in and be like, what are you listening to? I'm like, it's Enya. It's my background music. Leave if you don't like it. But yeah, so that to me is very helpful. Distraction, like I said, sometimes if you can get your mind right to like read a distracting book or watch an episode of something, just to be able to relaxing, it can help you feel better. Whereas sometimes with an anxiety disorder, it's very difficult, feels impossible to control or manage, right? And being able to wind down is just not really an option. And then, too, like anxiety, it can be a healthy thing. It's good for you to have a response to a negative or a toxic situation, right? You want to be able to say like, these are my boundaries. This is not okay. I don't feel good about it. I'm recognizing a threat and I'm going to remove myself or set this boundary. Whereas, that anxiety, like I said, it lingers on, and hopefully you'd be able to utilize your anxiety to be able to recognize a toxic situation. But also, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to have an identifiable trigger. It just comes on. And to bring it all the way back to my friend Mano, if you're out there, bring me on your podcast. I'd love to talk about Drag Race. No. It operates without any sort of logic sometimes, and it just comes right upon you. So, another amazing quote that I want to unpack more, but I thought also really plays into this is talking about, it's actually from the Queen RuPaul herself, Mother Dearest, is that your inner saboteur is just as clever as you are. So if you think about that, like, you want to think that you are able to outsmart those negative pieces of yourself, those negative, like, oh, my anxiety, I'm smarter than it is. Well, it's coming from you, and you have your inner saboteur, your inner person who's coming for you, unfortunately, has the same amount of intelligence, intellect as you do. And so it's figuring out those new ways of trying to harness the issues, relaxation techniques, whatever else it might be, to be able to move forward. And like I said, I want to unpack that a lot more in a future podcast episode. And I definitely want to do a lot more topics on anxiety. But I just, like I said, I heard that quote, and literally I was pulling into a Target parking lot for a pickup order, and I literally was like, yes, thank goodness. I need to remember that right now. Otherwise, I would have just paused the podcast, or like probably would have just made a note of like, oh, he said that at 13 minutes and 27 seconds. I'll go back and listen to it again to make sure I got it right. But because I wanted to write it down, because I just thought it was so, like, obvious, obvious. But then also it's not, because we expect so much from ourselves. We just shouldn't have to deal with that, and we shouldn't be this upset about it, or we should be able to get over things. And you're asking a lot. You're asking a lot of logic there that doesn't exist, because, and so that's why we talk about therapy, journaling, automatic negative thoughts, and thought stopping techniques, all of that stuff, because it's not just, oh, well, that doesn't line up. I'm not anxious anymore. And if it does for you, let me know. Let's talk. We'll write a book together. We'll use your skills. Oh, I don't know, because it definitely doesn't for me. I definitely have to practice those things. So, so that's my little peek into my life of obsession of drag, generally, obviously, specifically the Drag Race properties, with Drag Her, and then our queen, mother herself, RuPaul's quote as well. So I hope everyone has an amazing Thanksgiving. Like I said, please tune in December. We're going to have some in January, because we've got so many wonderful people who are excited to participate in this venue. I can't wait to have their voices be heard, and share on my little corner of the world, my little platform here with the family. So everyone have a great Thanksgiving. If you celebrate it, we could do a little tangent about being thankful is always a good idea. Maybe not so much the first Thanksgiving, air quotes. Maybe we're going to stray away from that, but still being thankful. Also, I realized that you can't really see my shirt. For those of you who are on the YouTube video, it's my free mom hug shirt. I'm so excited for it. I'm wearing it, and I realize all you can see on it is free. And so I'm sure some people, if you are watching, you're like, what does her shirt say? So I wanted to make sure that nobody was living without that. And for those of you on the podcast, you're like, yeah, Meg, we can't see you, and we don't care what you're wearing at all. So there you go. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy end of November. We're almost through 2021, y'all. We've almost made it. Have a great one, and be kind to one another.